I'm Eva O, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening. Sex work versus relationships. The second episode in the series, the miniseries on sex work versus dating, relationships, and marriage. Last week, we went through a few of the pros and cons of dating and how sex work has informed the experience for me greatly. And we progress into relationships. And this progression in itself is very telling of how I have learned about the ways that relationships should come about. That dating should progress into relationship, that is the natural way of how things should be. That this initial charge and infatuation and attraction leads to building something together, which is incorrect. I think that this initial charge and infatuation can help to make it palatable for you to stomach each other, build an attraction long enough for you to start to learn the ins and outs of someone, because you're not going to like the ins and outs entirely of someone. And that can form the basis of being able to form a relationship. But choosing to form a relationship should come with other parameters aside from that initial charge. And that took me a while to learn. And what are those parameters? For me, it's now it is about somebody who can look into my eyes and meet me eye to eye without being terrified, intimidated, who can meet me as an equal. Yes, I do love terror and intimidation, but within the context of play. I enjoy an equal. And that is very difficult to find because I have done a lot of self-investigation. I have lived a lot of life. And therefore, I mostly date. Just have the fun without thinking about that progression. Now, everybody's going to have different drivers as to why they would like to get into a relationship. Those drivers could be things like, they escape me. What have they been in the past for me? I just thought that that was what was supposed to be, really. And I think that it did come with some benefits that I will eventually go into. There are some. But I think that it's a societally determined mode of way of being, and I don't know how much place that necessarily has. And it shouldn't be forced, you know. It shouldn't be this thing that you have to partake in. I feel like it's something that needs to prove itself in order to place itself in your life, because they take a lot of energy and effort, and that can be part of the benefit. But it gets to a point when women are taught to carry the emotional burden and stick it out, and that success is determined by the ability to stick it out through bullshit. And although I believe that a certain amount of conflict and friction is very useful in building us as human beings, I think that having that as the basis of a term of engagement on an ongoing basis is a no. My life is a finite resource, and I'm not about to spend it placating somebody else. And I feel like, unfortunately, that is the narrative of what we are sold. That relationships are successful because you are going through it through and through. And I think that relating to other people is successful when you are able to see who they are through and through the ways that they move and the ways that life moves. But I think that there's always a choice to not carry them or walk beside the ones who are dragging you down. And I think that clarity only really came to me after I did it over and over and over again, believing that I needed to follow a narrative. And sex work has shown me that the narrative that we are sold is sold for reasons of control and lack of creativity. And it's given me an opportunity to see that relationships and the formats that are generally accepted, monogamy, are not the way that things need to be in order to build a successful life. And often questioning it, at the very least, is going to make for a more engaged and beneficial experience for oneself and for others. So, relationships. I think that getting into them, it has shown me really shitty sides of people. Has it shown me really sweet sides of people? No. I feel like the times when I've really seen the best of people are within my friendships and my family. And family is another thing, right? Talk about sticking it through. I'm very lucky to have a really solid one. So that is another thing that you don't have to stick through. But in order to not digress, I have gotten to witness the intricacies of how people can be when they feel that you are not going anywhere. And I think when they lose that perspective, their nastiness has more room to reign. I think when they take you as a given, they underestimate your value. They lose sight of it, and your value becomes tangential to their toying of you and the use of you in their life. I think this is far too common. I think there are ways, obviously, to have relationships where communication is open and the flow of life is respected and the potential changes of who we are is known. But I also feel that most people are very scared to see that within themselves and others, and it takes more energy and effort to ride that ride. And so it serves a base function, relationships, rather than potential, I think. And there are people who are very happy living in the base function of their existence, but I assume that they are not the ones listening to this podcast or watching it, for that matter. Yeah. And so, relationships. Relationships, like dating, has been very much informed by sex work for me, in that, yes, I have understood value through monetary compensation of time and attention, but I also have long-term clients. So maybe it's easier for me to kind of compare my unpaid emotional, sexual labor to my paid emotional and sexual labor, being sex work. That's a very important distinction to be aware of, that it is very similar forms of labor. It is the same form of labor, but one comes with the potential for financial independence from delivering that labor, and one often does not, unless you demand it, which I encourage you to do. Yeah, I think that as women, remember that this entire potential miniseries is from the dating the cis-het male lens, yeah. I think that as women, we are conditioned to nurture, care for, encourage, hold space for, tolerate. And we get very good at these things. And men are not taught those things. They are taught to take from those things. And it ends up being a one-sided emotional engagement, which used to be compensated with concepts of security and financial resource and, yeah, let's say security, because that also comes, I was going to say, what's that word? Status. But this diminishes as men stop sharing their resources. It's no longer common for there to be an exchange of resources when you get into a relationship. It's no longer common for the male access to financial gain is passed on in any way. And so I don't really see the benefit unless this man has done the work to be able to meet me emotionally, financially, in personality, in where I am in my life, and in where I could potentially go. And I think that I can find those things quite easily of the women around me, especially the sex workers who have been working for a long time, because they've been cultivating these skills in a very professional way for a long time. But it's very hard to find it in a cis-het man. I would say that I've met a handful. And maybe two who can do it in a consistent way. And so it kind of makes me question the point, really. Because I've done the hard yards, and I think I've gone through, the joys and the mishaps, the abuse, the glory, yeah, I've been through a lot. And I feel like I could have done that just maybe twice and gotten a good psychological support, and that be the end of that. And I would have maybe achieved what I have achieved now earlier. But onwards and upwards, and thankfully I still have some energy. And so with this perspective, I now am much more careful in my choices of those who I allow to be near me, who I allow to share in my energy and my attention. I have cultivated standards of equality and or above. Somebody needs to meet me in my capacity, and they need to help me uplift the things that I hope to achieve in life and not hinder it. And now I always ask myself that if somebody, is emerging out of a less casual desire into maybe I'm bonding and maybe it'd be nice to be around this person. Do they meet those things? Or is it just the oxytocin? Yum. Talking. Yeah, that would have been a great lesson. So please, listen back to it again. Write it on a note. Stick it on the back of your front door so you see it going out every day into the world. Is this the oxytocin, or does this actually help me in life? Does this help me, or does this hinder me and what I value. Yeah. And I think that I'm at the point in my life where I have done the rounds many times. And some relationships have definitely helped, you know. I would say that they've brought joy and laughter, and some of them have also brought financial support in that maybe some of them have paid the rent, and that's given me more creative freedom to figure out what it is that I want to do next, or, you know, but I can do that all at the same time in sex work. I have clients who have been with me for years who understand the ins and outs of me, who are so desperate to be able to meet me where I want to be met. And they pay me as they are trying to make themselves better. And like, this is the bare minimum standard now, you know, and some of those clients have really climbed up there. It has taken years. Yeah, but the fact that they were paying me for my time meant that I could be around to coach them like I would do for free in all of these relationships before. And I would slowly be getting the option to leave these clients, because I would have enough wealth to leave them behind. But some of them have also been able to not be dismissed because they've also taken that time on board with me and actually grown. So many things are possible. Yeah. And there is something about paid engagements that seems to make clear investment. Yeah. And I'm not talking about financial investment. I'm talking about everybody's attention, energy, and effort, you know? It's like I haven't experienced as much gratitude in my relationships as I have in my paid relationships. You know, the amount of times that they are grateful for my presence when they're paying me, that they tell me that you can see that they don't give me bullshit because they know they're going to get kicked out. It's like that the money, the transaction creates this like clarity for them. And I can kind of understand that. I feel like I've been in that space myself, that there's something about getting paid that allows me maybe more freedom to toy with like states of headspace and play and my craft, and not be hindered by the emotionality of things. And also, emotion can also give great charge to play. So I think that there's a lot of like pros and cons to how emotion is involved or compartmentalized via money. Maybe we should go into that a little bit before I make my decisions. So I feel like when it's compartmentalized with money, it almost like set some ground rules for the get-go for the clients, you know, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is going to be a transaction for a period of time. I'm going to be really like invested in it because it's my hard-earned money, and I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to get the most that I can get out of it. And that was great. Thank you. I would love to see you again. And the guarantee of an experience perhaps sets like a solid feeling for them. And the cycle, you know, keeps going and the bookings keep coming. Then you have like the relationship side of things where people start to get their egos tied up rather than understanding the parameters of payment. And this can bleed into the long-term paid clients too, but let's keep it separate for now. So when there doesn't seem to be money, the transaction around this engagement relationship, then I guess everyone's personal senses of value and what they're bringing to the table or not really starts to come into it. And all of the insecurities, I guess, more readily surface. And that can often leave a lot of distance, perhaps between the ability to feel gratitude, and therefore nobody feels valued, and that can go to shit more easily. So I kind of feel like in order to engage in a non-paid arrangement, there's got to be some pretty high levels of self-awareness in order for that to experience a sense of engagement, gratitude that I want to get out of my time with somebody else. That seems to be much more complex because then issues of insecurities and the ego really are much closer to the surface. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that it's been really interesting for me to observe and partake in these different ways of engagement and to see that the complexity of the emotionality can be something very entertaining for my mind and very also like useful in helping me figure out how to relate better and to see the fabric of people, which can also inform my work very well, right? And I think these things have worked together fairly well for me, but I'm at a point in my life where I've done the unpaid research and I've become very good at relating. A professional level, one would say. And I know how to do it. It's an art. It's become an art and a craft and something that I know how to do beautifully. And I want to do it beautifully, and I want to do it with people who appreciate it and who maybe are not, who, if they are not able to meet it, are able to pay me for it, because that payment allows me more freedom to spend time on the things that I value, which is relating. Look at the loop. But with those who deserve it, like through my Patreon, for example. I don't charge much for my Patreon. Small numbers signed up to there right now. I don't care. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do things like that. And the mentoring calls, which I also don't charge that much for. Or the podcast, which I spend money on. I couldn't do these things if I didn't have the financial freedom to do them. And how I've done that is understanding my worth and charging for it. Understanding that all of this history of women being taught to nurture and care for and seduce their way into security can actually do that. Because security does not mean shit unless you have money behind you. People can leave at any time, and they do. We'll get into divorce in the next episode when I do marriage. Yeah, there is no constant. There isn't. And the illusion of it can feel comforting, but it doesn't actually exist. And I think that if you don't wake up to that reality, it will come ramming you in the face at some point, and you will have nothing if you don't listen to this episode carefully. So that's what sex work has taught me about relationships and how I kind of bring all of those things in together and where I'm at with it right now. And I think that, going through the bullshit, wading through the mud, and it can give you a lot of great skills and life experience and understanding of yourself and where you situate also. All very useful things. But only waste your time on people who don't meet you or are able to uplift you like once or twice. Please get like proper therapy during to make sure you see the perspective. And then focus on yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Focus on what you value and what you're going to do with your life so that you don't experience immense regret. And so that I hope you can contribute to getting us further along rather than sticking to blind modes of existence. Yeah. Sounds harsh. Is harsh. That's what it is. But that's the reality. And I think that that's where I've come to with myself as well. I've very much still remember and feel, and it's very close, all of that emotionality. But I need to keep myself in check, because what do I want to use my life for? And that emotionality, actually, if you practice sex work enough, and if you're able, I guess, also to compartmentalize enough, and if maybe you're in touch with your emotional self, you can actually draw on it and kind of drop it. What I mean by that is I've learned to fall in love in session and fall out of it when they're out. Yeah, it's it's a really magical thing to be able to do, but it takes a lot of experience. So that's also a benefit that I guess I've learned how to have, that I can sort of conjure up that intimacy. Yeah. And get paid for it. And there's also something that this whole dance, wading through the mud, has taught me, that I do not have to invest all of that emotionality in this one partnership. And I can maybe talk about polyamory another time. But the real thing that I've taken out of my investigation of my relationships and whether I want to have them and how I want to have them is that my friendships with women who are sex workers, who have been sex workers for a long time and who are kind and smart people, tops. Probably can't undo it. Probably not going to happen. Because like I mentioned very briefly earlier, they have been practicing what I've been practicing for so long. How to drop into that intimacy, how to reveal ourselves, how to have boundaries so that we can survive this exchange all the time. But also there's a camaraderie because of the shared understanding and the experience. And they know how to be there for me and meet me, like I was talking about. They know how to think about what uplifting me could look like. And obviously, I am very lucky to have a very select group of people that it's taken me, 15 years to find. So that's not going to be immediately available. But I did want to share that, not immediately available to everyone, but I did want to share that that's also where I'm currently sitting, that the bulk of my life is to those who have proven that they are worthy, that they can meet me, that they are of worth, and that I want to do just the same for them, and that it is reciprocated. Yeah. And I'm always open to seeing how that could be in partnership. But if you're dating cis-het men, I'm telling you, the chances are slim. And so what else are they good for but providing entertainment, the dating, listen back to the dating episode, or giving us access to things that we don't have access to as women. Yeah? Which is money and connections. And which is maybe often sending them off to work. While we are then compensated for the emotional labor, for the potential access to intimacy, and for the wondrousness that we are and that we can be. So that's where I currently sit with all of this. I have a feeling that maybe when I have enough in the bank, and I feel like I have funded all of the women that I want to, I mean, this is probably never going to happen. But if it did, maybe then I would succumb to like wasting my time on, people who can't meet me so that I can just ride the oxytocin waves. Or maybe they'll invent something. Oh, wait, hang on. There are things. But to this fictitious future, to the reality of my now, that is where I sit with relationships versus sex work. Stay tuned for next week's episode on sex work versus marriage, which I have done twice. Thank you for listening.